There's always someone else on the road after midnight. Sometimes they're already in your car. It was 2:37 a.m. when I saw him. I was driving back from my girlfriend's place, heading east through the back roads of northern Pennsylvania. That stretch between Tionesta and Clarion is pure forest. No lights, no houses, just trees that lean over the road like they're trying to swallow it. I'd been driving for almost an hour without seeing a single other car. My gas tank was half full, music low, and I was in that weird trance you get when you've been alone too long on the road, when the lines start to blur a little. Then, I saw movement ahead. At first I thought it was a deer, but when my headlights caught it fully, I realized it was a man. Standing dead center in my lane, I slowed down, confused. He wasn't waving for help. He wasn't even facing me. He was facing the trees, completely still, with his arms at his sides. Something about it immediately felt wrong. I honked once. Nothing. I rolled down my window just a crack and yelled, "Hey, man! You all right?" He didn't react. He didn't even twitch. The silence outside was thick. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Then out of nowhere, he turned his head. Not slowly, not like a person. It snapped toward me like his neck had been pulled by a rope. That's when I saw his face. His eyes were wide open, glowing faintly white in my headlights, and his mouth was hanging open, not like a scream, but like his jaw was broken. There was something shiny running down his chin. Blood or drool, I couldn't tell. My gut told me to leave. I put the car in gear, and the moment I started to roll forward, his arm lifted. It didn't move naturally. It jerked upward like he was being puppeted. That's when I realized his arm wasn't bending at the elbow. I floored it. As I passed him, I couldn't stop myself from glancing in the side mirror, and I wish I hadn't. He was running after me. Running. Full sprint. His arms stiff at his sides. Feet slapping the pavement. I was doing 60, then 70, then 80. He shouldn't have been able to move that fast, but he was keeping up at least for a few seconds. His face was still turned toward me. I could see it clearly in my rearview mirror, even though he wasn't close enough for that to make sense. Then he just disappeared, not faded into the distance. Gone. I drove the rest of the way home shaking, checking every mirror like a paranoid maniac. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I sat there for 5 minutes, engine running, just staring out into the darkness. I was too scared to get out. The next morning, I told my dad what happened. He said that stretch of road used to be called Widow's Mile. Back in the 70s, a bus went off the bend during a snowstorm. Everyone on board died, including a man who'd been standing in the middle of the road trying to wave them down for help. I don't believe in ghosts. I really don't. But that night on that empty highway, I swear to God, I think I saw one. Story 2. The truck that wasn't there. This happened in 2019, on one of those nights where the world feels too big and too quiet. I was hauling furniture across Nevada, heading west on Route 50, the loneliest road in America. If you've ever driven it, you know it earns the name. Hours without a single streetlight, no radio stations, no cell signal. Just black desert on both sides and the soft hum of your tires. I'd been awake for almost 20 hours at that point, fighting off that bone-deep exhaustion only truckers really understand. Around 2 a.m., I noticed lights behind me, faint at first but steady. Headlights. I didn't think much of it. Probably another trucker making the same long haul. But the lights were closing in fast, faster than anyone should have been driving that road at night. Soon they were right on me, so close I could barely see their hood in my mirror. Just blinding white light filling the cabin. I tapped my brakes twice, the signal for back off. They didn't. Instead, the headlights flickered, high beams, then low, then high again. Like they were signaling something. I grabbed my CB radio and called out, "Westbound 50, who's on my 6?" No response. Just static. I tried again. Nothing. I was getting uneasy now. Out there, when you're alone that far from civilization, weird things start to feel personal. The truck stayed glued to my bumper for miles, matching my every move. I sped up to 80. So did they. Finally, I'd had enough. I flicked on my right blinker and pulled over onto the shoulder. The other truck slowed too, but didn't pass. It stopped, maybe 50 feet behind me. Both of us sat there, engines idling in the black desert silence. After a few seconds, I leaned forward to try and make out their cab, but all I could see were those headlights burning through the dark. Then, just like that, they shut off. Everything went black. The sudden quiet was unreal. I could hear my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. I waited, not daring to breathe, watching through my mirrors for any sign of movement. Then I saw the door of the other truck open. A figure stepped out. No flashlight. No glow from a phone. Just a shape against the starlight. He started walking toward me. Slow, steady steps crunching the gravel. I slammed the gear shift into drive and hit the gas. My tires spun in the dust before catching traction, and I tore down that highway like a bat out of hell. For maybe 10 miles, I didn't look back. I was sure I'd lost him, but then I saw it again. The headlights. They'd come back on, and they were closer this time. I was going nearly 90, the speedometer needle shaking, but that truck was gaining on me, roaring louder and louder until it felt like it was breathing down my neck. I couldn't even see the road right, just the glare of the lights in my mirrors and the terror choking me. Then something impossible happened. The headlights started flickering. Not like they were malfunctioning. They were strobing, in rhythm, flashing on and off faster and faster. And every time they went dark for half a second, I could still see the truck's reflection in my mirrors. Even without the lights, like it was glowing on its own. I don't know how long I drove before I finally saw another vehicle. A rest stop security truck parked off an exit. I pulled in, jumped out, and ran straight to the driver. The guy looked at me like I was crazy. I pointed back toward the highway, shaking, yelling something about a truck chasing me. He turned and looked. The road behind us was completely empty. I tried explaining, but he just nodded slowly and said, "You've been driving too long, son." That stretch messes with people. You start seeing things that ain't there. But here's the part that still makes my stomach turn. When I finally got back to my rig and climbed inside, I noticed something smeared across the back window. 2 handprints, big ones, pressed into the dust, sliding down toward the handle of my door. I still don't know what was out there on Route 50 that night. But every time I see headlights appear in my rearview mirror now, my heart starts pounding like it's trying to get out of my chest. And I swear, sometimes, when it's real late and I'm driving alone, I can see that flickering light again, far in the distance, keeping pace with me no matter how fast I go. Story 3. The Hitchhiker in the Red Jacket. It was late autumn of 2021 when I decided to drive from Flagstaff to Albuquerque overnight. I'd done that trip a dozen times, and I always left after sunset because the desert is cooler then, and the traffic disappears. The only downside is the loneliness. For hours at a time, you're surrounded by nothing but sagebrush, stars, and the sound of your own tires. That night, the highway shimmered under the moonlight. My gas tank was full, my thermos was half coffee, half regret, and I had an old playlist humming through the speakers. Around midnight, the temperature had dropped below freezing. A thin fog had started creeping across the asphalt, rare for Arizona, but not impossible. That's when I saw him. A man was standing on the shoulder just beyond the next mile marker. He wore jeans, work boots, and a bright red jacket that practically glowed in my headlights. He wasn't waving, just standing there with his thumb out and a small duffel bag by his feet. I never pick up hitchhikers, but something about him looked harmless. Tired, maybe, or cold. So I slowed down and pulled onto the shoulder. When he got closer, I noticed two things. He looked younger than I'd thought. Maybe mid-20s, and his eyes seemed a little glassy, like he'd been awake for days. He leaned in through the open window and said, "You heading east?" "Yeah," I said, "Albuquerque." He nodded once. "That'll do." Then he smiled, small, polite, and climbed in. For the first few minutes, we didn't talk. He kept both hands on his duffel bag, staring straight ahead. Eventually, I asked where he was coming from. He said Winslow. My car broke down. I told him I'd seen plenty of cars abandoned out here and asked if someone was coming to get it. He didn't answer right away. Then he said very quietly, "No one's coming." The way he said it made my chest tighten. I tried to shake off the weird feeling and focused on the road. The fog thickened, curling like smoke around the headlights. Every so often, another car would approach from the opposite direction, its lights filling the cab for a split second before vanishing behind us. The third or fourth time that happened, something strange caught my eye. Each time the oncoming headlights swept past, the passenger seat beside me looked empty. I told myself it was the light playing tricks. Still, when the next car came, I looked directly at him. And in that brief flash, he wasn't there. The seatbelt was buckled. The duffel bag sat on the floor, but no man. When darkness returned, he was back, head tilted toward the window, whispering something I couldn't hear. I nearly swerved off the road. "Hey," I said, trying to sound normal. "You feeling all right?" He turned slowly. His face looked pale, almost gray, but he smiled again. "Yeah, just tired." I wanted to believe that, but my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. About 20 minutes later, a rest area sign appeared, next exit 2 miles, and I decided that was as far as this ride was going to go. I told him I'd be pulling over soon and he could wait there for the morning traffic. He didn't respond. He just watched the fog sliding past his window. When I turned into the rest area, the lot was empty except for one vending machine glowing near the bathrooms. I parked under a light and turned to tell him we'd arrived. The seat was empty. His duffel bag was gone. The seatbelt still buckled. I opened my door and stepped out, calling into the cold air, but there was no one around. The desert was silent. No footsteps, no voices, nothing. I waited maybe 5 minutes, convinced he'd stepped out quietly or gone to use the restroom. He never came back. Eventually, I gave up and started the car again. When I checked the passenger side mirror before pulling out, I froze. He was standing at the edge of the light, maybe 30 feet away, facing the road. The red jacket looked almost black under the fog. He didn't move as I drove away. The next day, when I stopped for breakfast outside Albuquerque, I mentioned it to the waitress, mostly as a weird story to fill the silence. She stopped pouring coffee halfway through and said, "Red jacket? You sure about that?" I nodded. Her face went pale. She said, "People see him every few months. Always out there between Winslow and Grants. A guy died on that stretch about 10 years ago. Car crash. Wore a red windbreaker. Nobody ever picks him up twice." I didn't finish my breakfast. Now, whenever I see someone standing on a dark highway, I keep my eyes forward and my foot on the gas. Because some rides don't end where you think they will. Story 4. The van at the gas station. This happened on a road trip in 2020 when I was moving from Portland to Denver. It was just me, my old Subaru, and everything I owned stuffed into the back seats. Most of the drive was easy. Endless pine trees, podcasts, gas stations that looked exactly the same. Then came the third night. I'd taken a small highway through Idaho, thinking it would save time. After midnight, fog rolled in so thick I could barely see 10 feet ahead. My GPS kept cutting out, and I was running low on gas. When a flickering sign appeared through the mist, 24 HR service, I nearly cheered. The place looked abandoned from a distance. One cracked canopy light, a row of dusty pumps, and a little convenience store with bars on the windows. But the pumps worked, so I pulled in. While I filled the tank, I noticed a white cargo van parked around the side of the building. No markings, no license plate on the back. Its engine wasn't running, but the driver's door was open, and a strip of interior light glowed faintly through the fog. I told myself it was just another traveler catching some sleep. Still, I locked my doors before going inside to pay. The bell above the door jingled weakly. Inside smelled like dust and instant coffee. No one was behind the counter. I called out, "Hello?" Nothing. The hum of the coolers was the only sound. I walked toward the register and found a small note taped to the counter. "Back in 10 min. Pump first." Fair enough. I slid my card into the reader. It beeped once, approved, and printed a receipt. When I turned around, the door to the back hallway was half open, and I could hear faint footsteps. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Just paying for pump 3. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then a man's voice, low and calm. "You're fine. Just go on ahead." I didn't like how he said it. Too close, like he was standing just behind the door. I backed out slowly, keeping my eyes on that shadowed hallway. Outside, the fog had thickened again. The van was still there, only now both its back doors were open. A dim light glowed inside, illuminating rows of shelves lined with something. Boxes, maybe, or blankets. Hard to tell through the haze. I climbed into my car, locked it, and started the engine. As my headlights came on, they lit the side of the van, and that's when I saw movement. Someone stepped out from behind it, not the man I'd heard. This person was shorter, wearing a dark hoodie pulled low. They walked toward the front of my car, slowly, deliberately, like they were trying to see who I was. I shifted into reverse, ready to back out when I noticed something else. A second figure, standing just beyond the fog, on the other side of the lot. Both of them were perfectly still now. One near the pumps, one near the road. I couldn't make out faces, just silhouettes. Then the first one lifted a hand and pointed at me. That was enough. I hit the gas and tore backward, spun the wheel, and shot out onto the highway. My heart was pounding so hard it drowned out the engine. For 10 miles, I didn't see another vehicle. Finally, I pulled into a rest area and sat there shaking, trying to convince myself I'd overreacted. When I looked at my phone, I realized something that made my stomach turn. The gas station receipt had printed with no address, no business name, just the time, 12:43 a.m., and a single word at the bottom, void. The next morning, I checked the map to see where I'd stopped. There was nothing listed at that exit. No store, no gas station, just a closed service road and an empty field. Story 5. The car that followed us through the mountains. It was early spring of 2022, the kind of night when the air in the Rockies feels too still, like the whole world's holding its breath. My friend Lena and I had driven to a small ski town for the weekend and were heading home after dinner, taking the long route through the mountain pass because it was supposed to be scenic. Scenic in daylight, maybe. At 11 p.m., it just looked endless and dark. The highway climbed in narrow switchbacks, no cell service, snow piled high on both sides. Our headlights cut a thin yellow tunnel through the trees, and every turn looked exactly like the one before. We were joking about how we hadn't seen another car for almost an hour when a pair of headlights appeared far behind us, rounding the last bend. At first, I was relieved. Someone else on the road. But the lights stayed the same distance behind us for a long time. 5 minutes, 10, 15. Every curve we took, they took. Every hill they climbed right after. Maybe a local, Lena said. Or someone else lost, I answered, though my stomach had started to knot up. When the road widened into a turnout overlooking the valley, I pulled over to let them pass. We waited, the lights didn't move. They just hovered around the last bend, maybe 200 yards away, still pointed straight at us. After about 30 seconds, they blinked off. The darkness swallowed everything. Did they turn around? Lena whispered. I didn't know. I eased back onto the road, keeping my speed steady. We drove another half hour without seeing them again. Then, out of nowhere, they reappeared, closer this time. That's when the road started to climb again, the grade steeper, the guardrails gone. The headlights behind us swung wildly with every turn, like whoever was driving couldn't stay centered. Maybe they're drunk, Lena said. Or tired, I said, though I was pressing harder on the gas. When the road finally split, I took the left fork that led down toward a small lakeside town. The other route curved back toward the interstate. For a second, the headlights behind us vanished around the bend. Then, like they'd known exactly which way we'd gone, they appeared again on our fork. Okay, Lena said quietly. That's not random. We reached the lake a little after 1 a.m. The town was dark. All the shops closed, only a diner sign flickering near the water. I pulled into the parking lot and parked under a light. The road behind us was empty. We waited 5 minutes. Nothing. 10. Still nothing. We started to relax, laughing nervously, calling ourselves paranoid, until a shape rolled slowly past the intersection at the top of the hill. The same pair of headlights. They didn't come down toward us. They just sat there idling at the crossroads. I thought about calling the police, but there was still no signal. So we decided to head for the main highway again, figuring more traffic meant safety. As soon as we merged back onto the pass, the lights appeared behind us once more, closer. I floored it. 90, 95. The curves came faster, snow spraying from our tires. Still the lights followed, never quite catching up, never falling behind. Then, just before dawn, the mountains opened into a long, straight stretch that led down to the interstate. We could finally see clearly, pines thinning. First gray light washing over the road. That's when the other car swerved into the opposite lane and pulled up beside us. It wasn't a car at all. It was a pickup truck. The cab caved in, windows shattered. The driver's seat was empty. The engine roared even though no one was touching the pedals. For one frozen second, we saw it perfectly. Rusted frame, missing door, frost clinging to the cracked windshield. Then it jerked sideways toward the trees and vanished down a slope no vehicle could have survived. We stopped at the next gas station, shaking so hard we could barely speak. When the clerk saw our faces, he said, "You came down the North Pass? Folks still try to drive that? That road's closed every winter since the rock slide back in '98. A truck went off the edge. Never found the driver. Neither of us took the mountain route again. Even now, when I see a pair of headlights appear behind me on an empty road, my hands start to sweat. I always check the mirrors twice, just to make sure there's actually someone in the seat." Story 6. The Girl on the Overpass. This happened in late 2021 when I was driving back from visiting my sister in Idaho. It was almost midnight, and I was somewhere along Route 26, one of those endless stretches of road that feels like it was built just for you and the moon. No houses, no towns, not even gas stations for miles. Just that wide black ribbon of highway and my headlights cutting through the dark. I'd been driving for hours, zoning out to some late-night radio talk show, when I saw it. Or, I guess, her. At first, I thought it was a trick of the lights. There was an overpass up ahead, one of those concrete bridges that lets small local roads cross over the main highway. And on top of it, right in the middle, was a girl. She was standing barefoot at the edge, wearing a pale dress that was blowing slightly in the wind. It looked almost white, maybe light blue, hard to tell with the headlights. Her hair was long and tangled, and she was just staring down at the road, not moving, not waving, just watching. It sent a shiver through me. I slowed down automatically, half expecting her to jump. But when I passed under the bridge, nothing happened. I looked in the rearview mirror as I drove past. She was still there, just standing. Now, I'm not the kind of person who jumps to conclusions about ghosts or anything like that. I figured she might be lost or in some kind of trouble, so I decided to turn around at the next pull-off. Maybe a half mile down the road. When I came back around, though, the bridge was empty. No car. No girl. Nothing. Just the wind blowing across the concrete. I figured maybe she'd walk down one of the side roads, so I slowed down again, rolled down the window and called out, "Hey, you okay up there?" No answer. The only sound was my own engine idling and the faint rush of air from the highway. Then my radio, which had been playing quietly the whole time, started crackling. Just static. It wasn't even like it was losing signal. It was like something was pressing down on all the noise at once. I reached over to turn it down, but before I could, a soft voice came through it. I swear it sounded like a girl whispering, "You shouldn't have come back." Every hair on my body stood up. I snapped the radio off immediately and looked around. Still nothing. I didn't wait to see more. I got back on the road and kept driving. The rest of the way, I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see her walking along the shoulder or standing in the beams of my taillights. But there was no one. The next morning, when I finally reached my motel, curiosity got the better of me. I looked up the stretch of highway I'd been on. And there it was, that same overpass, only apparently it hadn't been used in years. The road it connected to had been closed after a fatal crash back in 1997. A 16-year-old girl had been driving home from prom when her car swerved off the bridge and fell onto the highway below. They said she died instantly. I didn't sleep much that night. And I never take that route anymore. But sometimes when I think about it, I wonder what would have happened if I'd actually gotten out of my car that night and walked up to the bridge. Story 7. The Man in the Rest Stop Window. This happened in the fall of 2019, somewhere in Wyoming. I was driving from Salt Lake City to Rapid City for work. It was one of those long drives that just drain your soul. Flat land, freezing air, and a sky so wide it makes you feel tiny. I left late in the day and didn't realize how fast night would fall. By the time the sun disappeared, I was already running on caffeine and nerves. Around 11:30 p.m., I pulled off at a small rest stop about 20 miles past Casper. I remember it clearly because there was absolutely nothing around it. No gas station, no stores, not even a vending machine that worked. Just 2 bathrooms and a row of dim yellow lights buzzing like dying insects. There were 3 other cars in the lot, but I didn't see anyone outside. I parked near the building, got out, and stretched my legs. The wind was sharp and dry, and the cold bit straight through my jacket. I figured I'd use the restroom, splash some water on my face, and keep moving. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered every few seconds. The air smelled like old bleach and dust. I was standing at the sink when I noticed something strange. The mirror on the wall wasn't reflecting quite right. The fluorescent buzz gave it a faint flicker, and every time it did, I could have sworn I saw a shadow moving in the background, like someone walking behind me. But when I turned around, the place was empty. I told myself I was just tired. I finished washing up, grabbed some paper towels, and that's when I noticed the window. The bathroom had a small rectangular window up high on the far wall. You couldn't really see out of it unless you stepped onto the counter, but from the mirror, I could see it clearly reflected. And in that reflection, there was a man's face looking in. Just a face. No body, no movement. Just a pale, blank face staring through the glass. I froze completely. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it would shake my chest apart. The face didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. After a few seconds, I finally managed to glance over my shoulder to look at the window directly. Nothing there. When I turned back to the mirror, the face was gone too. I was shaking now. I threw the paper towel away and hurried out. The moment I opened the door, the cold air hit me, but the parking lot was different. There were no cars anymore. Not a single one. I looked around, confused. I had heard engines earlier. I knew there were other people parked there. Now it was just my truck sitting under one flickering light. And then, from inside the bathroom behind me, the light went out. Just a click. Dark. I didn't even bother locking the door. I jumped in the truck and peeled out of there so fast my tires kicked up gravel. When I checked my mirror, I saw the rest stop shrink into the darkness. Just a square of light surrounded by miles of nothing. I didn't tell anyone about it for weeks. But about a month later, I was talking to another driver at a diner outside of Cheyenne. He was telling ghost stories from the road, and I asked him if he'd ever stopped at that rest area past Casper. He got really quiet and said, "Yeah, that's the one with the window." When I asked what he meant, he told me something I'll never forget. That rest stop had been shut down for years after a man froze to death in the bathroom during a blizzard back in 2007. They said the heater broke, and he tried to crawl out through the window, but got stuck halfway. They didn't find him until spring. Every now and then, drivers swear they still see his face looking out that same window just before the lights go out. Story 8. The car with no driver. This happened 2 years ago, in the summer of 2023. I was on a solo drive from Denver to Oklahoma City for a family reunion. It's about a 10-hour drive, and since I'd left later than planned, most of the trip happened after dark. The first few hours were fine. Quiet roads, empty highways, just me and my music. Somewhere around 2 a.m., I pulled onto this long 2-lane highway that cut through the middle of nowhere. No lights, no houses, just open plains stretching forever on both sides. I'd been driving about 20 minutes when I noticed headlights appear behind me. Far back at first, then slowly getting closer. No big deal, I thought. Just another late-night driver. But something felt strange about it. The car kept a perfect distance behind me, not passing, not falling back, just holding steady. I slowed down a little to let them go around, but they slowed down too. I sped up, so did they. I figured maybe it was a cop trying to pace me or something, but the lights looked off. Too low, too small. And when I leaned forward to get a better look in the mirror, I realized the headlights weren't white. They were this weird dull yellow, almost like fog lights. After about 5 minutes of this, I started to really get uneasy. Finally, I decided to pull over to the side of the road. If they passed, fine. If not, I'd have to figure something out. I turned on my blinker, slowed to a stop, and waited. The car behind me slowed too, then stopped. Maybe 50 feet back. I could see its outline now. A small, old sedan, maybe from the 90s. My hazard lights blinked red across the asphalt, but the car behind me didn't have any on. It just sat there. Engine off. I waited. 30 seconds. A minute. Nothing. Then my heart just about stopped when I realized something. Through my rearview mirror, I could see the windshield of the other car, and there was no one inside. No driver. No silhouette. Just an empty seat. I stared for what felt like forever, telling myself maybe the person ducked down, maybe they got out without me noticing. But the ground between us was empty. I didn't even want to breathe. The wind had gone completely still, and the only sound was my hazard lights clicking. I finally decided to go. I shifted back into drive and pulled away, glancing in the mirror over and over. For about half a mile, the headlights stayed gone, until I crested a small hill. When the road flattened again, they were back, same distance, same dull yellow light. That was enough for me. I floored it. 80, 90, 100. The road stretched endlessly in front of me, but no matter how fast I went, the headlights stayed exactly the same distance behind me, like they were attached to me somehow. Then, just as suddenly as they'd appeared, they blinked out. Gone. Darkness. I didn't stop again until I saw a 24-hour gas station 2 hours later. When I pulled in, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely grab my wallet. I told the cashier what had happened, half laughing at myself because it sounded insane. He didn't laugh, though. He just said quietly, "Yeah, you're not the first one." Apparently, that stretch of highway had been the site of a deadly crash in the late 1990s. A drunk driver had lost control and killed a family of 3 in a small yellow headlight sedan. The car had burned completely, The weirdest part? He said the driver's body was never found. I haven't taken that route since. But every time I drive long distance at night and see headlights in my mirror, I can't help but stare a little longer, just to make sure someone's actually behind the wheel. Story 9. The Voice in the Passenger Seat. It was last winter, somewhere between Albuquerque and Flagstaff. I'd been driving for hours through the desert, chasing a storm that seemed to be moving just ahead of me. Every few miles, lightning would flicker on the horizon, far enough to look beautiful, close enough to keep me uneasy. The road was empty except for the occasional truck roaring past in the opposite lane. Around midnight, I stopped at a small diner that looked like it hadn't changed since the 70s. It was the kind of place that smelled like coffee, rain, and burnt toast. The waitress filled my mug without asking and told me the storm was heading north. "Better stay on the main road," she said. "Back roads flood easy out here." I thanked her, paid, and got back on the highway. But about 10 miles later, I saw flashing construction lights and a detour sign pointing down a smaller 2-lane road. I didn't think twice. I just followed it. That's where the weirdness started. The new road twisted through low desert hills with long, straight stretches between them. No other cars, no houses. Just the hum of my tires and the rain starting to hit the windshield in slow, steady taps. I was maybe 15 minutes into that detour when I heard it. A voice. It came from the passenger seat. At first it was faint, like a whisper under the noise of the rain. I thought maybe it was my radio, but it was off. Then it came again, clearer this time. A low voice saying something I couldn't quite catch. I turned my head fast. The seat was empty, of course. I told myself I was tired, maybe imagining it. I rolled down the window a crack, hoping the cold air would wake me up. But the voice came again, louder now right beside me. It said, "You missed the turn." My chest went cold. The road was still dead straight. There hadn't been any turns. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. I didn't want to look again, but I could feel it. That unmistakable sense of someone sitting right next to me. The smell of wet fabric, a faint shift in the air like breath. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A dark shape in the passenger seat, just the faintest outline of a person. No movement, no face. "Just there," the voice spoke again, softer now. "You shouldn't have left the diner." I slammed my foot on the gas and kept driving, rain hammering harder against the windshield. I didn't look again, didn't breathe until I saw the glow of highway signs up ahead, the main road. As I turned onto it, the voice stopped. The air felt lighter again, like something had lifted off my shoulders. When I finally reached Flagstaff, I pulled into a motel parking lot and sat there for a while, trying to calm down. That's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. In the condensation on the inside of the passenger window, there was a single word traced with a fingertip. "Stay." I wiped it away and sat there until dawn. I never found out what road that detour was supposed to be. When I checked the next morning, there was no sign of any construction at all. Story 10. The mile marker that wasn't there. It happened 2 summers ago when I was driving through Utah, headed for Reno. It was late, somewhere past 1 a.m., and I was trying to make it to the next town before my tank hit empty. If you've ever driven that desert stretch at night, you know the feeling. Miles of nothing. Your headlights the only thing holding the dark back. The GPS kept saying, "Stay on this route for 62 miles. That number didn't change for what felt like forever. After about an hour, I started seeing mile markers again, small green signs catching my lights every half minute or so. But they were counting down, not up. 38, 37, 36. Which didn't make sense because I'd been driving west, and they should have been counting up. I figured maybe I'd missed a turn. Maybe the detour from earlier had looped me onto a frontage road. So I slowed down and watched for a pull-off. At mile 33 there was one. A wide shoulder with an old wooden sign that said, Service Road A. I turned onto it, just enough to stop and check my map. That's when I saw the lights. Far behind me on the main highway, 2 headlights, faint but steady. They looked like they were coming fast, so I shut off my engine to let them pass. The lights got closer, then slowed, then stopped right where I'd turned off. I sat there waiting. Nothing moved. Then, out of nowhere, I heard a knock on my passenger window. 3 slow taps. I nearly jumped out of my skin. There was nobody there. I could see clear through the glass. Just the reflection of my own face, pale and wide-eyed. I told myself it was the wind, some loose bit of gravel hitting the car. I started the engine again and pulled back onto the highway. The headlights were gone. I tried not to think about it. 20 minutes later, I saw another mile marker. It said 33. I'd just passed 33 half an hour earlier. Same dent in the sign, same scrub bush beside it. That's when it hit me. I was looping somehow. I checked the GPS again. It still said, stay on this route for 62 miles. Same voice, same tone. But now, beneath the screen's glow, the little blue arrow that was supposed to be me wasn't moving. It just pulsed in one spot, flickering like a heartbeat. I don't remember much after that. I drove until the gas light came on, until the road seemed to fade into the desert. And then suddenly, I was on a different stretch of highway entirely, the morning sun just starting to rise. No signs, no detours, just the open road again, and my GPS calmly saying, continue straight for 41 miles. When I stopped at a diner later that day, I told the old guy at the counter what had happened. He didn't look surprised. He just said, yeah, every few years someone finds that stretch again. There's no Service Road A. There never was. Story 11, the rest area that watches. I was running westbound on I-70 toward Salina. The night was already heavy with that strange desert-like silence you only get in the middle of nowhere. I'd been driving for almost 5 hours straight, radio off because of static interference, and the only sounds were my tires on the asphalt and the occasional whisper of wind. Around midnight, the storm rolled in suddenly, big angry clouds swallowing the moon. Rain started in sheets, smacking the windshield so hard I had to slow down to 40 miles per hour, even though I hate stopping in the middle of nowhere. My fuel light blinked. I was almost at a planned stop, but the storm made me panic a little. Then I saw it, a rest area that shouldn't have been there. I swear to God I'd driven that highway dozens of times, and I knew every exit. But this one, it wasn't on the map. One dim yellow street lamp illuminated the concrete parking lot. 3 vending machines hummed under the flickering light. Everything was wet, shining, and completely empty. I pulled in and shut off the engine. The only thing I could hear was the wind howling over the flat asphalt. I grabbed my umbrella, thinking I'd stretch my legs and grab a soda, but as soon as I stepped out, my boots hit the pavement and the rain. It stopped. No sound at all. Silence so thick it pressed against my ears. I thought maybe it was a pause in the storm. But the clouds were still rolling overhead. The air smelled like iron and wet dirt. The men's room was the first thing I noticed inside the building. I turned the knob, opened the door, and froze. One of the mirrors was missing, replaced by a rectangle of fogged glass that seemed to breathe with its own motion. When I wiped it with my sleeve, the reflection came back, but it wasn't mine. A man in a gray uniform stood behind me, face turned to the floor. I spun around. Nothing. I thought maybe it was a trick of the light, but when I looked back at the mirror, the figure had moved. Its hand was reaching toward the sink. On its wrist was a small brass key, the tag red as fresh paint, stamped 231. The key seemed impossibly new against the dust-coated tiles. I stumbled back, heart hammering. Every instinct screamed at me to leave. I turned to run, but the lights inside flickered violently, then steadied. I heard the faint hum of the vending machines behind me, now sounding like low, pulsing whispers. I bolted outside. The lot was gone. No building. No street lamp. Nothing but the wet, black asphalt of the highway stretching into darkness. I ran to the truck, jumped in, locked the doors, and tried to collect myself. That's when I noticed it, a receipt on the passenger seat. I hadn't taken anything inside. The receipt was soaked and the ink was smudged, but I could make out the timestamp. April 12th, 1987, 12:03 a.m., and printed below, in all caps, Crawford Station fuel stop. I floored it and got back on the interstate. The rain started again as if nothing had happened. My GPS flickered back on, showing me nearly 50 miles east of where I'd pulled off. I tried calling dispatch, thinking maybe someone had hacked the highway signage or something, but my phone refused to turn on. I made it to Salina, shaken beyond belief, but I didn't tell anyone. What could I say? I stopped at a rest area that wasn't there, saw a man in a mirror who wasn't real, and got a receipt from 1987. I didn't know if I would have been laughed at or committed. A week later, I found something in my mailbox. No return address, just a small wet envelope. Inside, a brass key, red tag, stamped 231. It's sitting on my desk now, and every time I look at it, my hands start shaking. I don't drive at night anymore. But sometimes, when the sky darkens and the road is empty, I swear I can hear whispers in the static of my truck radio. And I know the key is waiting for me to use it again. Story 12. Mile Zero. Dispatch sent me a new route last month. Denver to St. Louis. Straightforward on paper, but something about the map made my stomach knot. The GPS pinned my starting point at a place I didn't recognize. Mile Zero, Crawford Spur. I checked twice, then shrugged it off. I've been trucking across the Midwest for over a decade. Nothing surprises me anymore. The highway was quiet at first. Sunset had just faded, leaving streaks of pink and purple across the sky. I drove for hours without passing another car, just long stretches of cornfields and empty plains. But as I approached the area the GPS insisted was Mile Zero, the air changed. The smell hit first, metallic, like wet iron with a faint tang of something I couldn't name. Then came the static in my truck radio. No matter what station I tried, it was nothing but faint whispers. When I reached the exit, it was a narrow road cutting through weeds, almost swallowed by the land. It ended at cracked concrete and a half-buried sign, "Welcome to Crawford Station." The paint was faded, chipped, and peeling, but the letters seemed sharper than they should have been, almost glowing faintly in the twilight. My hands trembled on the wheel. I parked under the one working streetlight, but the light didn't shine fully. Shadows pooled in corners like thick liquid. I stepped out, and every step sounded too loud, echoing across a lot that should have been silent. The buildings were mostly empty. Abandoned gas pumps, a small convenience store with broken windows. I couldn't tell if the place was new or had been decayed for decades. It looked both at the same time, and that's when I saw it. A pile of brass keys, hundreds of them, all tagged 231, scattered at the base of the cracked mile marker. My breath hitched. I hadn't touched any keys yet, but the second I looked at them, a faint clicking sound started from inside the store, like 100 locks being turned at once. I told myself it was the wind. I told myself I was imagining it. But when I peered through the glass of the store, I saw them. Faint silhouettes moving in the dark, each holding a key. They weren't walking, they floated a few inches above the ground. And every shadow had a reflection in the broken windows, but none of them matched their bodies. I forced myself back into the truck. My GPS flickered. Every mile marker outside the window now skipped numbers. 227, 28, 0, back to 0. The odometer itself reset, even though the engine had been running the entire time. My hands shook on the wheel, and I could hear the faintest of whispers. You never left. As I drove, the silhouettes appeared again on the horizon, standing beside the highway. At first they seemed far away, then closer, then gone. And every time I blinked, the landscape shifted. The cornfields turned to empty pavement, the sky grew darker, and the smell of iron came back stronger. By the time I finally reached St. Louis, it was daylight. The city felt almost alien, a safe anchor in a world that had gone wrong. I checked my pockets. My keys were gone, but there, tucked under the seat, was a single brass key, tag red, stamped 231. I don't know if it wants me to return to Crawford Station or if it's just waiting. Every night I see the mile markers flash 0.0 in my dreams, and every time I drive through the empty stretches of Kansas, I swear I see a dim glow in the distance, the gas pumps, the store windows breathing faint light, waiting for me to come back. I know one thing. If I ever stop on that road again, if I ever take that exit, I might never leave. Epilogue: the roads that never end. Every highway has its own secrets. Some are carved in asphalt, hidden beneath the hum of passing trucks. Others hide in the shadows at the edges of the road, where the lines blur between reality and something else. The people who survived these nights, the man chased by the brown-coated stranger, the driver who stopped for a broken woman, the woman who escaped the roadside stalker, and those who stumbled onto Crawford Station, they all thought it was over once they reached home. They told themselves it was luck, adrenaline, or imagination. They told themselves the shadows, the van, the brass keys, and the impossible mile markers were figments. But the road doesn't forget. It doesn't forgive. Some nights, when the sky is too dark and the wind is too quiet, headlights appear where there should be none. Figures wait in the corners of rest stops. Mirrors reflect faces that shouldn't exist, and the faint metallic tang of brass keys hangs in the air like smoke. The miles reset. The odometers blink 0.0, and those who think they've escaped find a note, a key or a reflection reminding them they never really left. And then, sometimes, when you drive alone and the storm rolls in, you feel it. A presence, patient, watching from the shoulder, from the empty fields, from the trees leaning like they are trying to swallow the road whole. A whisper in the radio static, a shadow in the rearview mirror. Something that knows your name, your route,